Behind every locked door lies a story the world was never meant to hear. Welcome to Behind Bars TV, where we uncover the hidden realities of the world's toughest prisons, untold inmate experiences, and the systems built to contain them. From Supermax facilities to forgotten penitentiaries, we reveal the truth behind concrete walls and razor wire. This is not fiction. This is the world behind bars. In the heart of Virginia's coal country stands a place built for one purpose: control. Red Onion State Prison was never meant to reform men. It was meant to contain them, to crush rebellion, and to redefine what punishment means in America. Here, time doesn't pass, it erodes. And for those who live inside these concrete walls, survival isn't about serving time. It's about keeping your mind from disappearing. The beginning of the Supermax Era. In the early 1990s, America faced a crisis of confidence. Crime rates were rising, prisons were overcrowded, and the public demanded order. Virginia's answer wasn't compassion, it was concrete. When fear drives policy, punishment becomes architecture. Completed in 1998, Red Onion was one of the first of a new breed, a Supermax prison designed not to rehabilitate, but to eliminate chaos through isolation. Each block was a cage, each cell a coffin made of steel and silence. Inside these walls, inmates would spend 23 hours a day in total isolation. The modern answer to crime was solitude, a prison built by fear. To the small coal towns of Wise County, Red Onion was salvation. Jobs were disappearing. The prison promised security, money, and pride. But for those sent inside, it was a nightmare forged by politics and fear. When a town builds its future on cages, the people inside stop being human. They become the product. Red Onion wasn't built to help men change. It was built to make sure they never could. In the official documents, it was called a behavioral control unit. But inmates had another name for it: the pit. Life inside the box. At Red Onion, the day never changes. You wake, eat, and sleep under artificial light. 23 hours alone. 1 hour outside in a small concrete pen. No human contact. No conversation. No sunlight. Solitary confinement doesn't just punish the body. It rewires the mind. Doctors warned that extended isolation caused hallucinations, paranoia, and irreversible trauma. The administration called it discipline. Control has a cost. And here, it's paid in sanity. The riot and the reckoning. In 1999, just 1 year after opening, Red Onion erupted. Dozens of inmates refused orders, destroyed property, and confronted guards. The state called it a riot. Survivors called it a scream. It wasn't rebellion, it was reaction. The Department of Corrections denied wrongdoing. But leaked letters from inside told a darker story. Men beaten, chained, and left without medical care for days. Order was restored. But at Red Onion, order was just another word for fear. Control over cure. By the mid-2000s, reports began piling up. Mental illness was spreading like a disease through the prison's walls. Men who entered sane were leaving broken. If the body survives isolation, the mind still rots. Psychologists pleaded for reform, more contact, more treatment, more humanity. But the system refused. Red Onion wasn't designed to heal. It was designed to manage. The daily ritual of control. Every day at Red Onion follows the same choreography. Guards move like clockwork, every word, every motion scripted. It isn't about routine. It's about control. Here, even silence is scheduled. Inmates are allowed no conversation, no human contact, no deviation. Each cell is monitored by camera and microphone. Even the toilets are positioned to face the door. Privacy is power, and power is forbidden. It's not a prison anymore. It's an experiment in obedience. The science of isolation. Psychologists who studied inmates from Red Onion called it controlled psychological decay. After months alone, speech declines. After a year, hallucinations begin. After 3, the mind starts creating voices, just to survive the silence. Solitary doesn't kill you fast. It kills you one thought at a time. They call it the vent line. A whisper network through the walls, the only proof that someone else still exists. Inside Red Onion, the mind becomes both the weapon and the victim. Control shifts from physical chains to psychological ones. Punishment without touching. At Red Onion, punishment doesn't always come from violence. It comes from design. A light left on 24 hours a day. A meal tray withheld for a week. A mail delay of 6 months. You don't have to beat a man to break him. You just have to remind him that you can. These punishments are unofficial, never written, never reported. The officers call it behavior modification. The inmates call it psychological torture. The pain you can't prove is the hardest to heal. Inmates file grievances that vanish into bureaucracy. Complaints are labeled unsubstantiated. The state says, all procedures followed. The reality? Nothing human left to follow. Voices through the walls. Even in total isolation, humans find ways to connect. At Red Onion, communication becomes rebellion. They built walls to separate men. Instead, they built a network of ghosts. These messages carry news, warnings, poems, love letters, the fragments of humanity that the system tried to erase. The letters weren't just messages. They were proof that the mind hadn't surrendered. For every message found, a dozen more survived, traveling cell to cell like invisible lifelines. The lawsuit that shook the walls. In 2012, after years of silence, the walls of Red Onion echoed again, this time in court. Former inmates filed a federal lawsuit, accusing the prison of cruel and unusual punishment. They described beatings, indefinite isolation, and torture disguised as policy. The state called it control. The Constitution called it a crime. The Department of Corrections denied every claim, calling the allegations exaggerations. But behind the walls, the officers knew change was coming. Voiceover. For the first time, the machine was being seen. When speech is forbidden and movement is restricted, resistance becomes invisible. At Red Onion, inmates learned how to fight without fighting, by keeping their minds alive when everything else was locked down. If you can't move your body, you move your thoughts. The officers thought they had built a system that erased individuality. They were wrong. They built a cage for bodies. But they forgot, the mind doesn't serve time. Even in silence, rebellion breathes. The code of silence. The inmates weren't the only ones trapped in Red Onion's control. The officers, too, lived under a different kind of lockdown, a code of silence. The first rule of Red Onion: never question another guard. Whistleblowers faced exile, reassignment, threats, or accident during shifts. Loyalty to the system became a survival skill. In a place built on punishment, mercy is treason. Even good men became ghosts, performing cruelty they didn't believe in just to belong. The rebellion that never made headlines. In 2015, Red Onion witnessed something unprecedented. A coordinated protest across multiple cell blocks. No violence. No fire. Just silence. They took away their voices, so the inmates weaponized their silence. For 3 days, no one spoke, ate, or moved during count. Officers panicked. The system, designed to crush chaos, couldn't comprehend peace. They called it disturbance by noncompliance. But it was genius in slow motion. For once, the system blinked. And inside, men who hadn't seen each other for years felt connected through defiance. The journalist who opened the door. Her name was Sarah Daniels, an investigative reporter who refused to look away. She'd heard whispers about Red Onion for years, stories of torture, madness, and invisible deaths. When others dismissed them as inmate lies, she dug deeper. To expose a system designed to hide itself, you have to see what it doesn't show. Her 2017 report, Inside Red Onion, the prison that eats men alive, went viral overnight. It showed America what the state had spent decades denying. Red Onion was never about rehabilitation. It was about reminding society that mercy has limits. For a moment, hope broke through the fog. But inside, the retaliation began. Retaliation and revenge. After Daniel's expose, inmates who had spoken to reporters began disappearing, not from the prison, but from records. Transfers to isolation blocks, lost property, revoked privileges. In Red Onion, exposure is a crime. The prison administration denied everything. But internal emails later revealed orders marked Special Observation Protocol, the polite term for retribution. The walls listen. The walls remember. And the walls always strike back. Red Onion didn't just control prisoners. It controlled the story. But the story was no longer theirs to hide. The federal eye. For years, Red Onion had avoided the spotlight. But now, the federal government wanted answers. Following Sarah Daniels' viral report, the DOJ Civil Rights Division launched an official investigation into claims of torture, racism, and long-term psychological harm. When truth becomes too loud to ignore, even the system has to listen. The inspectors find patterns, identical incident reports, missing timestamps, falsified medical notes. A veteran investigator mutters, they're copy-pasting brutality. The evidence didn't reveal a few bad guards. It revealed the design. Headlines: Justice Department questions use of isolation at Red Onion. For the first time, the mountain fortress trembles. The human cost. While the government argued statistics, families grieved reality. Between 2010 and 2020, more than 40 suicides occurred inside Virginia's Supermax system, most linked to Red Onion and Wallen's Ridge. When you isolate a man long enough, he stops dying slowly. He starts finishing the job for you. Every statistic hides a story, and every story hides a grave. Even those who survived carried the scars, voices trembling, hands twitching from years of sensory deprivation. The report. After years of denials, the federal report was finally released. Its conclusion was simple and damning. Red Onion's use of solitary confinement constitutes psychological abuse. The walls weren't keeping danger in. They were manufacturing it. The Department of Corrections promised reforms, new mental health units, shorter isolation cycles, more oversight. But advocates called it window dressing. You can repaint a cell, but it's still a cell. When a reporter asks a released inmate what changed, he says softly, the color of the paint. That's it. The ones who never left. 2 decades after its opening, Red Onion still houses more than 1,000 men, many in solitary, some since the Clinton era. The world has changed. But inside, time remains frozen. America built a prison to erase its mistakes, and then forgot to erase the prison. Occasionally, one is released. They step into sunlight like cave divers emerging from darkness, squinting, shaking, unable to stand still. Freedom hurts when you've been numb too long. They call it post-isolation syndrome, nightmares, memory loss, violent flashes. But no therapy can undo years of silence. The question that remains. Red Onion was built for control, not rehabilitation. Yet, in the end, it controls nothing. Not the crime, not the chaos, not the cost. It only proves one truth. Fear builds walls, but walls can't fix fear. America's prisons were meant to protect us from monsters. But what if they created new ones instead? Inside Red Onion, control is a religion, obedience is ritual, and rehabilitation is myth. What you just saw is more than a story. It's a reality lived by thousands behind bars. If you believe in uncovering the truth, the kind hidden behind concrete walls and silence, then join us. Subscribe to Behind Bars TV and never miss a chapter in the world's most dangerous stories. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and remember, freedom and confinement are sometimes only a wall apart.